Guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was really hoping to have this video out sooner, but the fact is that ranking this series, it's possibly the hardest one I've ever had to do because, as stated in my review for Dead Reckoning Part 1, I have consistently liked or loved every entry in this franchise. So I had to rewatch each film when I had the time, and when you have a full-time job, 2 kids, and a fiance to appease, finding that time is a bit of a pain in the ass. Nevertheless, I found the time, rewatched each film, and took extensive notes on each one to make sure my list was where I wanted it to be. Just know, ranking these was really hard. It's probably not going to match up with yours. That said, here's my ranking of all 7 Mission Impossible films. I know Mission Impossible 2 has the reputation of being the bad one in the series, and while I agree it's the weakest of the series, I really don't see it as a bad movie. It's flawed and misguided, but not bad. I think the big problem with this one was that John Woo was trying to emulate more of a James Bond approach than he was a Mission Impossible approach. Honestly, that's why I think it's the weakest, because it feels the least like Mission Impossible, and just more like a Bond film. In addition, the slow-mo gets old real fast, especially in the climax, and dear God, they really overused the mask trick in this sequel, didn't they? But there's also a lot to like. DeGray Scott's Sean Ambrose is a good foil for Ethan Hunt. Most of the action is pretty awesome despite the bizarre editing choices. Tom Cruise and Thandie Newton have pretty good chemistry throughout. And I really loved Anthony Hopkins in this movie. He fit the role of the IMF secretary like a glove. He was perfect, and I loved his interactions with Cruise. It's got a lot against it, but it also has a lot that makes it memorable. If only for John Woo's direction, it's probably the most unique among the series. Does that make it great? No, but it doesn't make it bad either. If you haven't seen it in a while, I'd say give it a watch. It's really not bad, I promise. And I just lost about half my viewers, and I'm pretty sure my subscriber base is about to be cut in half because, from what I understand based on a lot of people's rankings, this one is the fan favorite. This is the one that everyone says is the one to beat. And I've honestly never felt that way about it. Don't get me wrong, the action is outstandingly directed, the performances are great, the team dynamic is a lot of fun, and it's filled with a ton of memorable and tense moments. As I made very clear in the intro, I do not dislike a single film in this series. Ghost Protocol is a very well done action film. That being said, aside from having, in my honest opinion, the weakest and most unmemorable villain in this series, I have always had an axe to grind with this film for 2 reasons. One, how dare you cast Josh Holloway, fucking Sawyer from Lost, as an IMF agent and kill him 2 minutes in? The hell was that shit? I'm sorry, this isn't some nameless guy you picked up in a casting call. It's motherfucking Sawyer, dude. I done declare shenanigans.
Shenanigans! Shenanigans! Shenanigans!
And yes, I understand this is a nitpick on my part, but if you're gonna cast an actor that badass in a badass action movie, you better show that badass being a badass. Instead, nope, he just goes out like a bitch in the beginning, leaving me with a case of blue balls. Thanks for that, Brad Bird. But this next one, it's not a nitpick. I'm sorry, but I, at this point, am so sick of sequel writers that have to shit on a previous entry in the series just to make their story work. Just to give you some examples, Men in Black 2 crapped all over the ending of Men in Black just to bring back Tommy Lee Jones. Halloween's 5 and Resurrection crapped all over Halloween's 4 and H2O just to get Michael back in the game. Fast and the Furious? Well, Jesus, take your pick. They got that shit down to an art form at this point. And I'm sorry, Ghost Protocol, despite all the cool stuff in it, crapped all over the third movie's ending by getting rid of Julia. It pissed me off when I saw it in theaters, and it still pisses me off now. And you know, it's not so much that they got rid of Julia, it's how they did it. You spend half the movie thinking she's dead and saying, wow, that's pretty morbid and messed up. Thanks for that. But wait, at the end they reveal she's still alive. Okay, but she's in hiding, so her entire life is ruined now. In what way are you making this better? It was so cheap and lazy from a writing standpoint. So much, in fact, that Christopher McQuarrie would later have to right this wrong in Mission Impossible Fallout by giving the audience proper fucking closure and giving her a proper fucking send-off. You know, gee, it's almost like if you put in the damn effort, you can do these things and do them well. It may be a solid Mission Impossible movie for what it is, but it was a very disappointing sequel in that regard, and it really bothers me that more people don't call that shit out. Now, I just reviewed this one, so I'll keep it brief. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is a very good action film, and was the serious kick in the ass that this underwhelming summer movie season needed. It features some amazing action sequences, no bullshit politics, a cool concept, and some very well done character moments. However, while the concept of the AI villain was cool, Gabriel was a very one-note and generic bad guy. Having him tied to Ethan's past was a bit weak. Haley Atwell gave a good performance, but her character was very boring overall. There's some continuity issues, but the biggest thing that bothered me was the decision to kill off Ilsa Faust, one of my favorite characters, halfway through. That honestly angered me, especially after the ending of Fallout. I didn't like that they tried replacing her with Haley Atwell either. Dead Reckoning Part 1 has its problems, especially for me, but it's still a fun, kick-ass action movie that deserves to be seen on the biggest screen possible, if only for the action spectacle alone. Now, guys, listen, with these next 4, these were the hardest ones to rank, because, I'm just gonna say it, all 4 of these films are perfect 10 out of 10 action films for me. I'm dead serious. But here's where I landed on them. Mission Impossible 3 was a more than satisfying course correction from the Bond approach to Mission Impossible 2. Again, I don't hate that film, but it is the farthest removed from the series, and the series really needed to be put back on track. J.J. Abrams stepped in and not only brought back the feel of what a Mission Impossible film should be, but set the standard and the status quo for films in the series from then on. This is a very personal story for Ethan Hunt, where his wife is taken by an arms dealer and he's assembling a team to retrieve her by the end. This entire film is white-knuckle tension at its finest, and the big part of that is due to inarguably one of the best villains of the series, Owen Davian, played by the late Philip Seymour Hoffman. This actor just stole the movie with this performance. I love how calm and collective he is, even when he's being interrogated or tortured. He doesn't need to scream every 5 seconds. He doesn't need to constantly punch things. He doesn't need to act annoyed at everything. Take a fucking hint. No. Davian can act completely stoic. Tell Ethan he's gonna kill his wife in front of him, and you instantly believe it. That is how unbelievably perfect this performance was. Rest in peace, Mr. Hoffman. You are sorely missed. Loved Michelle Monaghan as Ethan's wife, Julia. Again, still holding a grudge against Ghost Protocol for how it treated her. I'm not letting that go. Lawrence Fishburne and Billy Crudup are both good additions to the film. Simon Pegg as Benji was introduced here and would become a mainstay of the series for every film after. Really, though, it's the action and the nail-biting tension that takes center stage here. There are so many memorable moments. The scene on the bridge, holding Davian out of the plane, Hunt escaping IMF headquarters. But my favorite is towards the beginning with Tom Cruise and Kerry Russell shooting their way out of a stronghold. That scene is entirely badass. J.J. Abrams did a wonderful job bringing Mission Impossible back and making us all excited for what was going to come next. You know, I can respect others' opinions, but it absolutely kills me to see this film toward the bottom of so many Mission Impossible rankings. I remember being 9 years old and seeing this in theaters with my dad, so maybe nostalgia is playing a little bit of a part, but I just can't help it. I simply adore this film. Not only is it the one that feels the most like the show it's based on, but it's the one movie in the series that prioritized tension and suspense over action. There's still some great action to be had here, especially in the climax, but focusing on the espionage aspects first and all the action second really helps give this film its own identity. Brian De Palma was a suspense master, something he wholeheartedly proved with Carrie, and for my money, he was the perfect choice to bring this series to the big screen for the first time. I love how nail-biting some of the scenes are. That scene in the restaurant between Hunt and Kittredge is one of the best scenes in this entire franchise. The way the tension builds as the conversation goes on is just glorious. It's a movie where you don't know who to trust and who to hate. The performances are great all around. The way they get through the missions with limited resources is fun as hell to watch, and the cast was perfect. Tom Cruise, Jon Voight, Ving Rhames, Jean Reno, Emilio Estevez for 10 minutes. And let me just say, in any other movie, Kittredge would have been the obvious bad guy. But going with Jim Phelps, the main character from the original series, was a real ballsy move. And yes, a lot of people have called betrayal on this over the years, and I do get it. I can understand being a fan of that original show and not liking that. That being said, here's why I loved it. To all of you who watched that series and then saw this movie, yeah, you hated it, but be honest with yourselves. Did you see it coming? No? Exactly. That was the only twist. they could have done that wouldn't have been obvious. It's the only person no fan of the original show would have suspected, and I love that De Palma, along with writers David Koepp and Steve Zaillian, had the balls to go that route. I also love how Jim killed Jack, Emilio Estevez's character himself, but at the end, it's Jack's gadgets that become his undoing. Hunt uses the glasses to expose him, and then uses the red light, green light gum to kill him. I'm sorry, I think the level of hate this movie has gotten in recent years is beyond unwarranted. As far as action spy thrillers go, Mission Impossible was pretty much perfect. Yes, as much as I love that original film, I can't deny there are two I do enjoy more, but for very different reasons. Fallout was very much an Avengers Endgame type movie for the Mission Impossible franchise. It called back to all the previous entries in one way or another, and culminated in this glorious action-packed sequel that just gave us a kick in the ass at every turn. For example, as stated earlier, there's actually a satisfying send-off for Ethan's wife in this movie. Yeah, where were you on that one, dipshit? It co-stars Vanessa Kirby as the White Widow, who coincidentally turns out to be the daughter of arms dealer Max from the first film. Solomon Lane, the villain from Rogue Nation, even comes back for some revenge against Ethan. And for the love of God, I pray Dead Reckoning Part 2 brings him back because, damn it, I love that villain. These are just a few examples, but this movie isn't just a callback fest. The movie features pulse-pounding action, some of the best performances in the entire series, and like all good Mission Impossible films, features nail-biting tension and suspense. I know I sound like a broken record talking about that, but those are two very essential elements in creating a great Mission Impossible movie, and this was no exception. Henry Cavill was absolutely perfect in this movie. He owned every scene he had and held his own against Tom Cruise very well. It was so cool seeing him play an antagonist after watching him play Superman for years. The movie is filled with tons of memorable action scenes, the bathroom fight, the plane jump, the helicopter chase. Every action beat is brilliance, and both Cruise and Cavill perform each scene with absolute precision. Rebecca Ferguson comes back to play Ilsa Faust, and she's every bit as badass here as she was in Rogue Nation. I love the team dynamic, I love the callbacks, I love how fun the entire experience is overall. Fallout was a perfect Mission Impossible sequel in every sense, and if I'm being honest, I wish it had ended here, as it would have ended on an absolutely perfect note. Yes, Rogue Nation is my favorite Mission Impossible movie. Again, ranking these last 4 films was tough. I adore all 4 of them. It was like choosing between my children. Not an easy task. But here's why I landed on Rogue Nation being my favorite. The first Mission Impossible movie, as I stated, focused more on tension and suspense than action. Not that the action wasn't there, but it wasn't the priority. Fallout and MI3 had great action moments that I adore, but they tended to overshadow the suspense. Again, not that it wasn't there, it certainly was, but the action took priority. Rogue Nation is the only Mission Impossible movie to, in my opinion, blend the action and suspense perfectly. Both are pristinely balanced out. There's not too much action, there's not too little action. There's not too much suspense, there's not too little suspense. All of it balances perfectly in this film, making it, for me, the perfect Mission Impossible movie. I struggled to find the flaws that others have seen in it over the years. I'm sorry, they aren't there for me. The storyline regarding the Syndicate was ingenious. This whole anti-IMF organization with Ethan on their trail was a great concept. Ilsa Faust, as I've said, one of my favorite characters in this series, and at her best in this film. She's literally everything Grace should have been in Dead Reckoning and wasn't. Rebecca Ferguson and Tom Cruise have wonderful chemistry. I love seeing these two play off each other. I loved the group dynamic in this, with them all having to work around the CIA after they dissolved the IMF. Benji, played by Simon Pegg, is awesome in this flick, and the scene with him and the bomb had me gripping my chair in the theater. Hell, it still has me gripping my chair at home because the editing for that scene is so damn pristine. Solomon Lane is my favorite villain in this series. Much like Owen Davian, he doesn't need to constantly scream to get his point across. Hell, he barely has to talk. All he has to do is shoot a cold stare at you from across a room, and you know shit is about to break off. And yes, he's also in Fallout, but he's also broken and out for revenge in Fallout. Here, he's cold, confident, manipulative, always in control, and, for my money, just a lot more interesting. And Sean Harris's performance just knocks it out of the park. The action scenes are beyond memorable. Ethan hanging on the side of the plane, the opera house scene, the interrogation scene, the underwater sequence. It is amazing to me that Tom Cruise did all these stunts himself. This was Christopher McQuarrie's first film in the franchise as both a writer and director, and while he keeps trying to up the ante with the action in the sequels, I really hope he takes a look back at Rogue Nation and remembers the perfect balance of action and suspense he struck with it. So in the end, folks, how would you rank the Mission Impossible films? Please let me know in the comments, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more.